Hey, do you teach yoga? Have you ever trained to lead yoga classes, to be a yoga therapist? Have you ever owned a yoga studio? Maybe even just wondered what it was like for the women and men up there in front of the room on their mats, leading you through endless Surya Namaskars, down dogs, and pranayamas galore? Well, these are their stories, and mine. I'm Rebecca Sebastian, a 20-year yoga teacher, 10-year yoga therapist, yoga studio owner, and co-founder of a yoga-focused nonprofit. I've done a lot in the yoga world over the last 20 years, pretty much everything except had a water cooler. You know, a place to share stories, talk about struggles, successes, and find other people who do the same thing that I do. Welcome to Working in Yoga, a podcast and substitute water cooler for yoga folks to connect and build community, to share our unique profession, our challenges, and our journeys with the world.
Hey friends, welcome to Working in Yoga. This week on the podcast, I have Melissa Adylia Calas talking about intellectual property, teacher trainings, AI, and tech. I was actually telling Melissa a couple days ago that this podcast was coming out this week, and she pointed out something that I want to highlight. Each person on this podcast series, Jay Brown, Kim, Justin, Mandy, Melissa, Ram, they all come to the table with very different perspectives about tech and AI. While we all have concerns, we have things that we're excited about, and we also have things that pique our curiosity. This is one of the things that I hope I've done for you during this series. It is a pretty new frontier for us culturally, and I think we have the perception that we're not especially tech receptive in the yoga space. Now, I don't think this is true, especially based on our incredibly quick response to moving online during COVID, but there's no denying that the age of AI is upon us, and we, as yoga professionals, should be ready for how it changes our work. My hope with this series is that it sparks some conversation or new ways of thinking for you. And if you need a springboard for that thought process, well, check out our discussion guide. The link to that is in the show notes. And if you could do me a favor and go ahead and like, subscribe, or follow the podcast from wherever you're listening, that would be amazing. That tells those AI algorithms to send this podcast to more people who have the same interests that we do. And that makes our community bigger and more interesting. If you're so moved, I would love it if you gave the podcast a 5-star review. And if you can do that from a listening platform like YouTube or Apple Podcasts or Spotify or Audible, that would be great because that helps the podcast get more traction to be seen by other folks. And finally, Melissa and I talk quite a lot in this episode about SAG-AFTRA, the Screen Actors Guild and American Federation of Television and Radio Actors. This union is an incredibly influential union in the United States, and if you've been listening to this podcast for a while, you know I have a particular love for workers' rights and how labor can collectively organize to change culture for the better. SAG has been talking about intellectual property rights and AI for a while now, and it's worth listening to them as they broaden the discussion of this topic for all of us. Okay, so let's get into it, my friends, and have a discussion with Melissa Adylia Calas. Hey friends, welcome to Working in Yoga. Okay, so this week on the podcast, I have another episode in my AI and tech series that I'm doing, and I have my friend Melissa Adylia Calas on the podcast. Melissa, please tell everybody who you are and what you do, and I'm so excited for this version of this talk. Okay, go.
I'm super excited to be here too. My name is Melissa Adylia Calas. I am pretty much the ultimate multi-hyphenate. I am an IOYT certified clinical yoga therapist and a clinical health and wellness educator. However, I recently took a step away from yoga therapy and working within the healthcare sector to take care of some personal things that were beyond my control. But I also went back to the entertainment industry, and that's kind of what brings me here to this conversation about AI. I am a dancer, a voiceover artist, an actor, as well as a poet and a writer. So intellectual property has been something incredibly important to me, not just as an educator or a yoga therapist or an entertainer, but as a human being, because human connection is so important to me. I would also like to say that I am a lover of plants, cats, poetry, and people, all of which I believe have the ability to lend more to this world beyond anyone's personal and professional identity. So it's yoga. Life is yoga, connection and respectability and respectfulness. So I can go on forever about that. So that's me.
Okay, so one of the things that I find most fascinating about you is because you are also a member of SAG-AFTRA, and I feel like actors and entertainers have been on the forefront of thinking about how AI is kind of taking our intellectual property and repurposing it, and we're not getting credits for it. So I want to have that conversation of the AI tech world today with you because it's difficult to find people that overlap or who have thought about things like intellectual property. I mean, I still find that to be such an issue within the space of us stealing off each other, let alone tech coming in and taking the work that we're publishing out there and repurposing it for itself. What are your initial thoughts about that?
Okay, first off, so for SAG-AFTRA, again, I as being an educator, I really like to communicate with people. Acronyms can mean so many different things depending on the sector. Context is key. So SAG-AFTRA is the Screen Actors Guild slash the American Federation of Television and Radio Artists. So these are unions that protect performers and writers and stuntmen and choreographers and, well, not choreographers yet. We're trying to get them in there. One of the largest labor unions in the United States. And the reason I find this is very important for people to become cognizant of what labor unions do, you don't have to be in a labor union. You're already benefiting from what labor unions have done for you. And still, if you're hesitant to join a labor union, become aware of what they're fighting for. So you at least have some bargaining knowledge and some numbers even to advocate for yourself or protections to, realize that you can be proactive with your, navigating contracts or rates and stuff. SAG-AFTRA has been at the bargaining tables with unions all over, whether it be healthcare, whether it be housekeepers. There's so many different labor unions and organizations, and they've been attending something called CES. It's like what's it called? The Consumer Electronics Show in Vegas for over 20 years. What does this have to do with yoga? What does this have to do with intellectual property? Well, as you know, advertisers use entertainers to get products out there into the world. From my knowledge, which is limited, remember, I'm not an expert in this stuff at all. I'm a yoga therapist and clinical health educator. The unions have been going to these things because they are on the forefront of the cutting edge of technology. The entertainers bring these things and sell them to the public, and there's a lot of money behind getting these products out there. And so it's products and profits over people first, usually. And so SAG-AFTRA goes to these events so they know that, oh, what's on the horizon that we need to, brace ourselves against. So when it's time every 3 years or so to go to the bargaining table for our contracts, how can we protect ourselves? I became aware of not AI yet, because I didn't know there was no words for AI, but how technology was expanding and growing exponentially was around 2008. I was just getting to retire as a dancer and entertainer, and I was opening up a small business. And I got a commercial. It was my last commercial. And I didn't have an agent anymore because I left the industry. I booked a national commercial. And so I called a friend who was still working at an agency. And I said, hey, Andrew, can you help me with this contract? He's like, we need to put something in here that says, when I went for the second buyout, which give you a chunk of money to use your picture, to use video, to use audio, and anything in any media. Now, this is before YouTube had anything more than 15 seconds option to load things. Facebook didn't have any advertising on it yet. There was no Instagram or anything. And you only had Yelp, Chowhound, and Zagat. And so there was no way to, people weren't bullying people's products online, which became a way to weaponize people to get free things from, businesses. Anyway, so he said, we need to put a clause in your contract that says to only be used in with all, technology that's available at this time. And I never had heard of that, but we didn't have to think about that then. I'm so glad I did that. And it was also around that same time when grassroots marketing was going beyond. I was one of the first like Lululemon ambassadors at the Americana on brand. And in those days, they really did offer you a lot of stuff to be an ambassador. You'd get to teach a class on the green. You'd get an outfit every month. You were invited to all these things. You were already doing this stuff in the community because you just did it. But then all of a sudden, people are like, I want to be on a Lululemon poster. I'm going to tell them I'll do it for free. They won't even have to give me stuff. So then things started to become so commodified, and a lot of running ambassadors too. I did a lot of in the running world, and people, the products realized they can get people to do this for them for free. So now ambassadors had to work. These were now people undercutting in entertainers and commercials and stuff. They weren't getting good quality entertainers. People were showing up late. There were always flakes. But other people were now seeing their faces everywhere without any compensation. So I was glad I had left the industry. What
Yeah.
does it have to do with yoga therapy, AI, and entertainment now? Because now we've come full circle. I was working in a very large healthcare group up until 2022. And that was the pandemic. I had created some wonderful programs. And luckily, I was the content expert. And I had already had some of my intellectual property stolen from me when I was a business owner. My bios were stolen from me verbatim for people who were teaching spin classes. My descriptions of my classes were stolen from me and used verbatim also from a wannabe, soon to be up and coming physical therapy office. Luckily, I had clients who were lawyers and they took care of that for me without anything like this is happening. So I learned lessons that on every page you put, not to be used by whether you can do anything with it or not, you have to have good lawyers, you have to have good representation. And it's a shame because I never thought I'd see this in the wellness world, healthcare, or anything.
Mm.
When the pandemic came, I created these programs, but I had put on the bottoms of the pages, again, content not to be used without explicit permission by Melissa Adylia Calas. Well, these were also my programs before I came there. And then I also evolved them and I got to write off on them, whatever. So when it was time when things were getting strange in healthcare, we couldn't do things in person and people were recording, and I was seeing the trend on Instagram and Facebook and everything. And I stopped doing lives open to the public because I started to see my stuff being somehow that on Facebook, I'd see my live streams from my own garden on somebody else's page in Thailand. It without
Yep.
credit to me, and they're out there. And then they were on YouTube, and I was like, first of all, that's my voice, that's my garden, that's really, really personal. And it's my hour and a half with people who've entrusted me with their care. This wasn't for everybody. And I know people want yoga available for everybody, but this was for my community. Some of the things I'm talking about weren't pertinent to someone in Siberia because we got birds chirping and it's sunny in Southern California. I'm giving a different practice for this weather, literally, the weather and the season and, whatever. So then all that happened. And then I was told, hey, we would love for you to record. This is healthcare again. We'd love for you to record your classes so we can disseminate them to all the different hospitals, because I was teaching physician wellness classes too. And I would stream, my husband even helped me live stream to the clinicians because I was taking care of nurses and gerontologists and all these things. And I had to be really good at what I did because I had some people who couldn't see me because they were on handheld devices that were major HIPAA protected, and they were like on a break in a strange room. They could hear me, but they weren't going to be doing movement. There were people that I knew wanted to do movement. They couldn't see me or they couldn't hear me. And I needed to know how to do that. But being a professional dancer and a dance educator also for many, many years, I know what it's like to teach in rooms where people don't speak the language, Someone may not be able-bodied like the person next to them. They may not be sitting, standing, or whatever, and they actually might be walking to their car or going to the break room. It was over 30 years of my practice to attend to those people. And so they wanted me to now live stream these out to different regions. And I'm like, well, let's talk about a buyout. And they're like, what are you talking about? I'm like, well, I would love to be compensated for all. Let's talk about how many people per thing. Are we going to be paying a lump sum for the year or for 3 months or for each time? They're like, no, you'll get paid your hourly. And I said, well, even though my union card is on hold, I might want to look into this. And so I went back to my agent. I'm like, how much to reinstate my union thing? Because I'd had it on hold since like 2014. And I start to look at the rates for voiceover or for video or for education, because there's protections for industrials or clinical education or healthcare or whatever, or video tours or museum docents, like whether it's a sound bite or your video. So I'm thinking, well, okay, I'll tell this new supervisor this is what my rate is. She's like, well, we don't do that. You're not union with us, which I wasn't. I was per diem.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm thinking, is this worth it? And so I talked to some of my other friends who had done some books and stuff at the hospitals and stuff. And I said, how much did you get when you created your handbook for, total knee replacement aftercare? Like, what do you mean? And I'm like, well, how much did you get for it? Like, I just did it. And I didn't realize that it's like universities, that what you create on campus, literally, whether it's healthcare or academic, it's called campus. What you usually create on campus becomes the intellectual property of your employer. Luckily, since I was per diem, I was fortunate that I knew how to protect myself. Now, also, there were people who had no problem going to videotape themselves and getting this done. I wound up leaving just because I wanted to be able to tend to my clients who were finding me online, which was really messing with the boundaries of personal care and professional, work. And then I dealt with some really crazy personal stuff. There was a murder, there was death, there was crazy. So I took some time off. I knew that it made more sense for me to come back to the entertainment industry than try to plug myself in. It was reminded me of something I heard on your podcast. Like, why would you want to work so hard to be a part of the system that's already not working? We're usually the last resort, but they have no problem cannibalizing all the hard work most of us have done for decades. And this is not just something you go like, hi, I'm going to go take a master's program, which again, thank you for doing a master's program. It helps you understand how to work within a system, but it doesn't always set you up to be a critical thinking human with compassion and kindness and respect and agility of mind, body, and spirit, which again, AI has been proven to yet be capable of doing. And as yoga therapists, aren't we supposed to be connecting? And I'm seeing a trend in the last few years. Actually, it started again during the pandemic, when people were truly generating yoga therapy programs and 200-hour teacher training programs that were verbatim other people's programs. Because I've seen these programs, because I have some of my students and clients have always come to me saying, who should I train with? And I said, I want you to search. Give me your 5 most exciting ones. Which programs excite you? And they're like, well, just tell me. I'm like, my expertise is going to be different than yours. And that's the beauty of us. We need people who have those specific interests. Let me give them to me and I'll vet them to see. I'm like, oh, yeah. So I've read so many amazing programs out there. And then all of a sudden I'm like, this weird, like $75 online, $200 or 200-hour teacher trainer. And then people are like, well, this was when there was an issue with Yoga Alliance. And I'm thinking, but no one was protecting. Yoga Alliance wasn't protecting, the students, because to me it's the students, which means the public. And then the schools, I think, were also complicit with this. And I see schools right now using AI saying, hey, you can generate an AI template for intake for your patients and your clients. How is that connecting with your yoga therapy client? By making them check off boxes which do not allow for self-reporting or for adding their own thing. Because if you just have five options, we don't know what happened before they ran into the house that day to sit down and do this. AI does not generate a personalized program for your clients. Make it easy. Well, if you're making it easy, maybe you're biting off more than you can chew as a business person, as an ethical yoga therapist or educator. So I'm sorry, I'm going way too long on this. AI, ethics, cart before the horse. What are we doing in yoga therapy? I'll take a breath. And I'll let you ask it because I'm like, I could go on for hours because it's a systemic problem. Oh,
So the first question I think people aren't thinking about is like when you go into ChatGPT is the typical AI most people are using. And if I was to go in and say, create a yoga class or a yoga therapy protocol for, my client Bob, and Bob has this, this, and this, or my class on Sundays at 5, and I want it to feel like this, and AI comes out with that. Where do y'all think that information came from? Like where do you think AI got the idea of what to put on that like little thing that it spits out to you? I mean, that was somebody's property, intellectually speaking, somewhere on the internet that it, scraped and put together in a database. And so like I think we've not thought about the repercussions of using tech or AI in that way, especially to like do our jobs for us. No, I've had some people on this series come and say AI can be a springboard. Like, give me some ideas of how to think about something differently. Great. I use it for that too. Like, hey, my brain's not braining today. Give me 5 ways to think about this and then I'll go from there. But I think especially from that intellectual property aspect, like where do you think it got the idea from? It's not thinking of it itself.
and not only that, think of the quality of what has been fed into that quote unquote
Yeah.
machine. Because let me tell you, let's look at the person who's usually doing this. They're stressed. They've maybe overextended themselves. So they're some might call them lazy even or unprepared or uninformed. They're feeding their stuff in there or someone else has fed somebody their stuff in there. Is that who do you really know you're trusting to
Yeah.
regurgitate this out to you? Now, I have several friends and clients who work in academia, beautiful writers that just recently found out in the last 2 weeks that some of their, like one beautiful book
Yes.
by Anna Leahy, Tumor, an incredible book. She found out that's being used, that was used to train a bunch of her other stuff. Now, thank God, like for me, I'm like, well, at least they used her writing because her writing is exceptional. And that's fabulous. But I also know some of the other stuff that's been trained on is like
Yeah.
rubbish. And not just from an aesthetic point of view, it's like the grammar is horrendous. The context is incorrect. And it's like, what are we trusting? And it's like this outsourcing that I see. And whenever I hear the words, are you stuck? Do you need to upsource? You got people who took some random business coaching class that wasn't really necessary as a yoga therapist. Because let me tell you, the people who aren't really on social media, the people who have been working their programs in hospitals for over 25 years, I don't see them promoting themselves on social media. I have never taken a picture of my students in downward dog or in child's pose. How intrusive is that? The good people who are doing their stuff are doing it under the wraps. Now, for me, most of my clients, up until I left, when I went into healthcare, I think I sold my soul a little bit when I did that because I was somehow comparing myself to people. In once I joined IAYT, it seemed that became the pinnacle. Like you need to get into
Yeah.
healthcare, and I realized I was doing much better when I was an independent contractor. It wasn't easy, but I was able to truly care for my clients the way they needed because, again, they had already gone through the healthcare sector. I was a last resort. Um, and then how does AI play into that trajectory and how this evolved is that people started to use new words and if you go back 25 years to when they started to commodify yoga, it started with, again, big box healthcare. And they knew how to regurgitate trainings, and you do it with idea fitness conventions. And all of a sudden, like, oh, the yoga people, they pulled us all in because we looked really good doing it. And then we didn't know anything about intellectual property then either, except for the entertainers. And then it's marketing and marketing. And then where do we go if we go back to our yamas and niyamas? Are we over grasping? Are we stealing from ourself? Are we stealing our own time by going, I need to generate more business? Well, can you really handle it? Is it sustainable? And it brings me back. I'm sorry, I'm so tangential because I see such the big picture. Going back to critical thinking, when you have anybody here who's an IOIT person who's gotten the surveys about how you work within healthcare and how many hours you work and are you full time? Every time I hear that, when they say yoga therapists only work like 3 days a week, if that, where's the critical thinking or clarifying question option? Because let me tell you, when I was doing my best as a yoga therapist, I only took maybe 3 days a week yoga therapy clients, because for me to give to them every single thing they needed within an hour or an hour and a half, I required 3 hours for my life, because I have to be so focused and so dialed in. The rest of my stuff, group fitness classes, spinning, yoga, restorative, taught that throughout the week. But I only, as a yoga therapist, worked never more than 15 hours ever, on purpose, for my own
Same.
sanity, my self-care. And I'm seeing these yoga teacher trainings talking about full-time work as yoga therapists. I'm like, that's a liability to yourself and to your client if you're taking on that much intensity. I mean, perhaps it's because of the demographic I worked with, which was stress, chronic pain, sleep, and mood management. But also, I worked with people who, again, I had confidentiality agreements. So I wasn't advertising myself out there because I couldn't, but everything was referral. But now people are comparing themselves to all these people who are AI generating these programs on this little hamster treadmill, and then disconnecting from their clients by doing intake online versus one-on-one, whether it be via Zoom or in person. I don't think that's yoga therapy. I'm not saying that I'm a purist, but I'm a humanist. Is that the right word? I care about people. And so AI can serve a purpose. Like, I'm a terrible speller. I am a terrible texter. AI was, from what I know, it was originally brought in to help people who may have had um, disabilities, or may, been, you know, uh, um, challenges with sight or with hearing or cognitive, function. AI was there for communication purposes for the good, but greed and working from a place of scarcity. I hear that a lot in your podcast, and that scarcity mentality is not, it's not sustainable. It is not
Yeah.
sustainable. So,
I think especially when you talk about like that scarcity mentality, or what I'm now shifting into this, like, because I feel like we've had this dialogue for a really long time that yoga has a money problem, and I actually think yoga has a poverty problem. Like, we have a real, like poverty is an underlying like core construct of our industry, and I feel like we idealize it a little bit. Like, we all have to work for nothing, and that's how we're the most quote unquote good for yoga. And I feel like we need to stop saying that. I need that dialogue to go away, because I paid too much money for my training, and people who are 10 years after me paid triple what I paid for my training, for their training. But we've not talked about this idea of like, A, intellectual property, and B, how, like, if we're using AI to run, like, you've made a really good point. First person on this series who said, like, people are using AI to create trainings. And it's freaking true. I see it. Like, they're coming through and they're saying, write my 200-hour teacher training manual for me. And AI will do it. AI doesn't care. It's going to scrape the internet.
advertising that say, yeah, create your own 200-hour teacher training.
My God, Melissa, we need to talk about this though. Like, I'm not even kidding you. Can we talk about using AI to create teacher training programs and courses? And how many people do you think are using ChatGPT to write a certification? Because there's like, I don't know, 5 trillion certifications in the industry now. Like,
Well, let me say something. Anybody who's on those yoga therapy Facebook pages, I see you asking your questions. And I mean, bless your heart. I know you're trying to do good. I'm hoping that's what it is, but where are there should be ethics involved there, and I don't think it's ethical to be generating a yoga teacher training program from AI for one reason to start with. Doing the work, creating the program is part of your profession and your duty as an ethical, decent human being. And this goes back into people who are creating programs to be educators or teachers. Nowadays, I'm seeing a lot of them have never been the student themselves, except with the sole purpose of becoming a teacher. Now, I'm going to sound like the horse and buggy little old lady going back in my day, but back in my day, we weren't taking yoga classes to have a job. We were in classes because we were in class. Now,
yeah,
being in Los Angeles, I was spoiled because entertainers, we were given comps to a lot of the best studios in LA, whether it was Larchmont Center for Yoga or Golden Bridge, and we were part of the bodies that were used to create certifications that are now defunct because of controversial reasons, and I luckily have no affiliation with them whatsoever anymore. But they we were in class because we needed it as professional movers of bodies. We were professional dancers who did a lot, but classes were different then. It was more of a lineage of sharing and mentoring. And you didn't just move up in rank, you were invited up in rank. You were in class every day. You were never late. You were always attentive because you wanted to learn. Then you were asked to demonstrate. You were the body, and they were getting you ready to present and then sub a class. And you were excited to sub a class. You weren't being paid. And again, it's not that we were being exploited. I'm sure there are places that were, but they needed to see if you had the confidence to do this. You didn't know you were being groomed to do this. And I don't like to use the word groomed anymore, but this is how martial arts and dance and gymnastics, which again, all have their charismatic leaders and their people who take advantage of things. But there's something to be said about the process of learning as a student while also observing in a room how other people learn. And you learn how, oh, some of these words don't land very well over here, or wow, it resonated with so and so but not with this person. And it gives you the tools to be as agile as possible, and it doesn't happen within a 200-hour training. It happens within lived and observed experiences as a human being. And it will be different regionally. It'll be different in a city, in a community, and in a studio, and in a room, and one-on-one. And it will evolve from there. AI cannot do that, nor do we really want it to do that. And so when people are creating programs, they also get to reflect on their own knowledge. I ask people who I'm mentoring when they wanted to learn how to create programs like I did at large healthcare groups, I would say, well, have you ever taken your own program? Oh God, no. I'm like, seriously, you're going to expect people with stress, chronic pain, or going through chemotherapy to sit through a 2.5 hour class every week for 12 weeks? What day of the week are you going to do it? Well, we'll do it on Saturday because everybody's off on Saturday. Well, actually, no. People who usually, are predisposed to stress, chronic pain, and overexerting themselves will always default to caring for their family before taking care of themselves and going to a program that's for their well-being. Well, that's their problem. They should advocate for themselves. And I'm like, no, we're supposed to meet them where they are. And so I would always choose a specific day. Well, this would work different for someone in LA who doesn't have public transportation access like everybody else. If I were in Chicago or in New York, it might be on a different day of the week because of access to transportation or access to elevators. It's simple things like that. I'm like, if you've never been your client or your patient, How are you going to create this program? And then now you're going to also outsource it to AI. I mean, there's so much disconnect with people who've never worked their own program. Like every time I taught my 12-week program, I took it like I was a student every single time because golly, things that could happen in the world, whether it be politically or storms and devastation, an earthquake, a flood, or hurricane, they're going to impact people differently, mentally, emotionally, personally, professionally. Think about that from a yogic perspective. Is an AI generated program going to be able to navigate those quick pivots in everyday life and catastrophes or when things are going great? So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so tell me this, how do we protect our content? So you talked a little bit about like having a little tag at the bottom of your website. Is that like a good place to start? Do we just all get off the internet completely and don't put anything on there? Like what do you suggest are like basic things that you're being told or you were told to do to protect yourself? Like how can we protect ourselves?
Well, I know I won't even say how we can protect ourselves. I'm going to start again where the seeds are planted. This is the responsibility of our educators, first and foremost, because our
Yeah.
students will always emulate the people that they admire. And if the person in the
Yes,
front
yes.
room is talking disparagingly about their patients, oh, these train wrecks, they're going to perpetuate that persona, whether they're a yoga therapist or a health educator or not. Now, if we are teaching our classes and say, hey, out of respect and because I know you are an ethical human being and that's why you came into this profession, you are going to give credit where credit is due. Some of you people who are academics, you understand about plagiarization, and I know that the university has taken your content too, but it doesn't mean we have to perpetuate that harm.
Yeah.
So I encourage everybody, if you're going to be using this, not because I'm the best person in the world, but please give credit where credit is due. Give a nod to your mentors, give a nod to the people who brought this here. There's enough appropriation out there. Now we're going to give it to a computer. So I would say it's really important that we plant the seeds as educators first. The onus shouldn't always be on the one who is getting the knowledge because they don't know what they don't know.
Yeah.
So since this podcast is usually towards educators or people in the yoga world, maybe
Yeah.
aspire to be an educator, it starts there with, again, look at your yamas and niyamas, y'all. And you just something
Yeah.
simple, and I'll use just the most basic words, non-stealing, non-grasping, basic, don't bite off more than you can chew, don't take something that's not yours, whether it's a 10 commandment or a yama or niyama, whatever your faith or philosophy, we know what is ethically right. Say something, see something, get something, give something. And that goes with how we teach. So first starts there, you know,
Yeah.
plant the seeds. And we're also can show best practices for ourselves. Like again, on our pages, if you want to do one of those thing on every single page of your handbooks, it's sad that we have to do this now, but I saw more intellectual property snagging, pirating in the wellness world than I did anywhere else once the pandemic hit. And that's why people don't see me associated with the wellness world anymore because you know what? I don't want their fleas. And so I have 4 cats. I'll take the fleas from them because they don't know any better. But really, I was stunned. And the wild thing was, it was students of mine who brought most of this stuff to my attention. They're like, whoa, is this right? Like, is it cool to do this? What do you think? How do you feel about, I see this $75 200-hour teacher training online. Can
Yeah.
you take a look? And it goes back to, again, putting so much emphasis on what you need and that scarcity mindset lends people to do things that aren't always ethical. And so I ask people to step back and go, who are you comparing and competing with? Is it yourself?
Yeah.
The person who has a really great search engine visibility and a great website. There's some people with very dolly. I don't even have a website. I have something
Yeah.
that's archaic and whatever. If somebody wants to judge me on that, fine. But there's a lot of people with very shiny objects and beautiful, front pacing. I can't even say it. You know, um, pages or whatever, and yet they're reading from their phones when they're teaching a class. And it's like, and the thing is, I see that in teacher trainings. The teacher, the expert, the content expert is reading off their phone. If you do not have this knowledge embodied within you, should you be sharing it at a master level? And that goes back to the whole Yoga Alliance thing. Like, I can't go teach a teacher training module because guess what? I don't have a 500 hour with Yoga Alliance. Well, honey, I started training in 1990, started teaching in 1996. We didn't have certifications really. And when I came back to California in 2000, people who knew me are like, oh, come and teach a class. And then they're like, oh, actually, to teach now, you have to have a certification. Now, they were cheap as hell in those days, but it was a lot of money to an answer. But I had already seen the writing on the wall in the healthcare world because I was already in the healthcare world and in the fitness world. And I'm like, if I'm going to spend that much money, I'm not going to do it on a redundant teacher training, which I've been doing this for so many years, 5 days, 7 days a week. So I took a personal training certification back then. Several of my friends to this day, they're like, thank you for encouraging me to do that with my 200-hour yoga training instead of going further, because that's how they got to work within healthcare or in collaboration with healthcare providers. And now a lot of us who we didn't even know we were doing yoga therapy, quote unquote, people came to us like, oh, you're the yoga therapist, huh? But this is before yoga therapy. This is before the 2000 stuff. And universities are now building their programs on decades of work of people who've been yoga educators, yoga teachers, and yoga community creators, like not content creators, creating and cultivating community. I mean, when Larry Payne used to go down this little driveway back in the 90s and the 2000s before he was the big thing, it's like it was a small community that got bigger and bigger and bigger. There was no advertising in those days. You put a piece of paper up at, the juice bar or at Erewhon before it was expensive. It was a very crunchy place in those days. So, oh goodness, I'm sorry, I'm so on a tangent here. We were talking about the teacher trainings and the manuals, right? I'm so sorry.
Can protect ourselves, and I actually think you made a really important point of, like, first of all, that comes from the top. Like, if you are training people, you have an obligation as a trainer, as an educator, as somebody who other people are listening to model the correct behavior for the people who are coming underneath you, right? Like that point in itself, critical. So if you're training people, get your shit together, my friends. Like we have to be modeling that behavior. And oh my God, what you said about people reading off of their phones, like their scripts off their phones, like there is a point where you're right. This discussion of AI, we have to talk about the difference between using AI to help you think and the fact that we're divorcing our embodied experience. Like if you like there was one particular instance, I'm thinking of somebody who was high up in a yoga place last year who read a speech, like probably the most important speech of their life to a huge group of people on a town hall from a freaking piece of paper. Like 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 this, and I was going, you know what?
Speech is one thing.
But really, you need to know your content. Like, know what you're saying, know what you're doing, because then it's yours, and then it doesn't belong to a computer or somebody else. Like, I love that point.
Do you agree with that? Well, now the thing is, speech is one thing because that's personal and it's really strange. I know for me, again, I'm an entertainer. I can talk in front of a room full of strangers, thousands and thousands of strangers, done it for years. If I'm in a room full of my peers and I'm going to be speaking from my own heart about me, oh my God, give me a piece of paper because that's personal. But when it comes to sharing information, intellectual information about stuff that will help others, I'm great at that. Not a problem. So we all have our gifts, but I sure as hell am not going to ask the AI to generate any of my content of any kind, except for spelling. Please help me with spelling because I'm the worst speller in the world. But then this is the other thing that happens is that you've got people who put out these programs. They've atrophied their critical thinking skills or their editorial capabilities. That are they reading it and going, oh, I guess it looks familiar, so I guess it's correct. And so they're not even knowing how to edit their stuff to see if it's the right information. And like you said, yeah, we have to embody and present ourselves in a way that the next person will, because I ask people, everybody's trying to get these teacher training or no, continuing education things. And
Yeah.
I'm going for the next big thing, but I'm like, I forced myself to take a 200-hour teacher training in 2014 because I kept getting clients coming to me that were getting severely injured. There was so much hands-on stuff, and I wrote a thing about hands-on adjustments. And I'm like, what is going on in the yoga world nowadays? Like, people were not getting injured in yoga, and I had been out of the world as a practitioner, except for restorative by then, because I was too busy working and tending to clients. But I'm like, you know what? I'm older, my body's different, my needs are different. I'm going to take a 200-hour training. I'm not going to let the teachers know that I ever took yoga before. And what it was the most enlightening experience I ever had, and I learned so much. And this is before I even met Jivana or any of them. Is that I was still in perfect shape, perfect health, had not had any injuries. My injuries were from landscaping, not from dancing or yoga. Um, I took a 200-hour training at a college, which the philosophy was spot on. The most amazing philosophy teacher ever for yoga philosophy and the human anatomy, spot on. I encourage a lot of people who want to take yoga trainings to go straight to a college, to a community college, because at least their physiology, human anatomy, and history will matriculate into a university if they ever want to go someplace else. And it's cheap as hell. And you at least know there are some really great standards for those things. And so I take this training, but the person who was teaching the practical body stuff, there was a whole day on hands-on adjustments. Now, no one bothered to ask me again. I was old already. I'm in my 50s now. This is 2015. And I didn't want these 18-year-olds touching my body because when we did the introduction, everybody's like, what made you want to take this yoga teacher training? The one that sticks out to this day in my mom and I were on this like wellness retreat in Mexico, this little girl says. And she's like, we took 2 yoga classes. And she was giggling and she was saying, like, oh yeah, you're like, it was so much fun. I mean, yeah, they had margaritas beforehand. They basically took 3 hours of yoga in their life. And her mom's like, you should become a yoga teacher. So her mom enrolled her into the yoga teacher training. So I'm getting my goat right now because these are the people going into a 200-hour who are now going to feel embodied or empowered to now put their hands on other people or direct people who are being sent to yoga by their medical professionals. These are also the ones who've now seen a yoga teacher training where somebody's teaching them on their phones and have generated things by AI. They're going to think that's how you do it.
Yeah.
So I ask all of you people who have your yoga schools and your yoga teacher training programs, do you really need 40 people in your class every single year? And your answer is going to be, oh, but I have to pay for my overhead. Well, maybe you expanded too fast, too soon. Go back to your yamas and niyamas. You know,
Yeah.
yeah.
You've said this a couple times on this, and I keep thinking, God, I agree with her. And it is that baseline of how much you need to be a practitioner before you train to do anything. And I believe very strongly there needs to be expectations in each level of how you're training, like how much you have to be a practitioner before you do a 200 or a 500 or a yoga therapist, which is part of what my beef was with the IYT is none of those people who were getting medical certifications, there's no requirement that anybody in the healthcare world have been a practitioner first. And like that should be like a baseline requirement for us. Because like ChatGPT also doesn't have to be a practitioner. Like it can just spit out information.
Let's just talk about HIPAA issues. Let's talk about
Yeah.
HIPAA issues right now because a lot of these companies go bankrupt or get sold. And people don't realize that when they have put like these ones that the yoga therapists are accessing for their intake, or here's your template for your, client intake, you're having to generate this into some weird portal that then gets sold off to another company.
Yes.
And this is you don't know who this stuff is going to go to. Just like when if you sign a waiver, in the entertainment industry, even at dance studios, to use your likeness and your phone number or whatever the heck. Well, they switch from Mind Body to another online, portal. What happens to that merger? We didn't sign thing for this company because you don't know what their cookies are or whatever. I'm so not tech savvy with the verbiage, but it's it's a real strange thing because I also see the same people who want to use those chat GPTs or the AI generate things are like, can somebody get me the cheapest, CEU training things? Yet they
Yes.
complain that nobody wants to pay for their, classes. Well, honey, you get what you give.
Yeah.
Quality gets quality. And my accountant that I had way back in the day said, you have to respect your business. Are you teaching are you running a business or a charity? He's like, if you want to run a charity, that's fine. We'll set you up, for that tax, thing. But he goes, but what's important as a business person, you pay full price because there are people who are going to understand what you have to offer. And if they're not paying it, maybe you're not ready yet to be selling it. So, and he goes, and so you pay full price because people will value it. And then you are at your own sole discretion to give yourself freely in your community. And so I never thought I was doing charity when every Thursday, I would do the runners conditioning and warm ups and cool downs at this local run club. Well, it was fun for me. I loved doing it. I wasn't doing it for charity. I was doing it because I loved it. And
Yeah.
it was also helped my mental health and it helped refill my cup so I can deal with two clients the next day and teach five more classes. And so, if you're filling your cup, the little cliche that goes, you fill your cup, you have so much more to give because when you go out into your community without worrying about your bills being paid, they're seeing your smile, they're seeing your grounded presence, and they're coming up to you, you're getting the hugs or the high fives or the thank you so much whisper in your ear. I never would have been able to finish walking those 3 miles have I not learned how to breathe or just smile while, everybody's running and I'm only walking. I'm like, dude, miles are miles no matter how you get them done. Just like with yoga, people want to learn all these tricks and teach all these tricks in yoga therapy when most people have never even noticed their breath.
Yeah.
And that's all we got to do for 12 weeks sometimes, or slow down outside of the room and find the little thing that I posted on the whiteboard. Was it a flower today or a fish? And what corner was it in? And, I also would know if they read it because it'll say something really small on the bottom, like put your block on the right side of your mat the moment you sit down. And I'd notice, oh, only two people did that today. There was probably an accident on the freeway and people were rushing. It's okay. But it gives
Yeah.
my way to assess the situation without asking questions, things like that. AI is not going to teach you that. AI is not going to create a program and a protocol because that's going to be important with people wanting to work in healthcare if you think you're a yoga therapist. If you don't put certain things in writing specifically, explicitly in writing in your protocol, if you're creating a pilot program, especially anybody who wants to be entrusted in creating pilot programs, if it's not in the pilot program, it will not be repeated when they finally roll the program out. Like for me, I needed 30 minutes between everybody. That the teacher, the instructor needs 30 minutes in between classes for setup and breakdown and for sanitizing purposes. I put in sanitizing purposes because you don't want to deal with scare. I needed to wash my hands and take a breath and go to the bathroom. But honestly,
Yeah.
if there's nothing written in there for a break, guess what? They will work you for 4 hour blocks straight, back to back with 12, 15, 20 people who are in high intensity situations. So, AI, is that going to do that for you for your protocol? Nope. Are they going
Mhm.
to protect you as a teacher? Nope. Yeah.
What will AI do for you that's good? So we have like I actually think you've brought up amazing points that actually haven't been brought up. Like, girl, you are like my sixth recording on this series, sixth or seventh. And I love this conversation about how like you've brought up a bunch of things that other people haven't brought up, right? Especially like the deterioration and breakdown of our trainings and certifications and that kind of thing. Do you think there are things AI can do for us that are beneficial or helpful? Like, what do you see as like a pro?
Well, from my perspective as a, like a pro for AI, I can't spell, and thank goodness for that. And that's all I can say about that. I'm trying to think of anything else for AI. I mean, I know that for people who have challenges with sight and with cognition, it could be a benefit. But again, the tools are only as good as the carpenter. The boat is only as
Yeah.
good as the captain. And there are some people who will set people out to sea with a paddle and a plank. And if somebody didn't ever learn how to, work with eddies, tides, and, notice, how to rudder a boat with their foot or their finger. It doesn't matter how great the boat is. If things start
Yeah.
to fall apart, you're going to drown. So I would tell people, I won't tell anybody what's going to be good with AI. What I would encourage people to do, and this is going to sound really bizarre, whether you're an entertainer or not, I would go and check out the SAG-AFTRA website
Yes.
and put in AI protections for writers. Because again, if you're creating a program, you're a writer.
Yep.
Um, AI protections for writers, AI protection for likenesses. Because think about all you people who sold your voice to all these streaming meditation apps. Honey, they're doing some
Yes.
crazy stuff with your voice now. You're seeing all those little deep fakes. It's no joke. They're doing it on Instagram, even for fashion outfits, things, whatever.
Yes.
So go to the SAG-AFTRA website. They also have, I know they have podcasts too that talk about, I need to go listen to them. They did some stuff they went to those conventions, the CES convention, and they do talk about how unions are working to protect people's intellectual property and their likeness and their voice using, from AI. And they probably have a lot of information on how to protect yourself and also how to advocate and use it ethically. Um, I would say become informed and become curious, become skeptical, challenge me on anything I said because I only know what I know. And I'm learning every single day about AI. I personally will not be using AI for any of the teachings I do except for spell check because I am the worst speller. And I know that I would never even pass I wouldn't pass an IOIT test. You got to understand there's a lot of people who are excellent as yoga therapists, movement educators, dance and movement educators, um, that are exceptional at what they do, but we don't test well. We have insane critical thinking skills and we can articulate verbally what we need to tell you. But if you put a multiple choice thing in front of us, forget it. It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
So AI could be beneficial. Please tell me. I can't wait to listen to this season of the podcast because let me tell me how AI is going to benefit me because I challenge all of those people out there who have their teacher training saying, I plugged this into AI and let me show you what I got here. Every time you share stuff like that out there, people are going to think that's what you're supposed to be doing because they want to emulate the people who have the biggest sign, the loudest voice,
Yeah.
and coolest car. And I doubt that's anybody's intention, but we got to realize we don't know who's in the audience. And we have to
Yeah.
and we have to stay connected. AI is outsourcing the human connection, especially in a sector where people come to us because they are isolated. People who are in need, who are coming to yoga therapists, whether they're in need for emotional, physical, community support, they're already feeling isolated as it is. And if you are going to be plugging them into some random algorithm to churn out some random program for them, I believe you have done them a disservice. And
Yeah.
call me preachy, call me whatever you want, but I think we need to stay connected to humanity, especially if we are quote unquote selling this cure for all these ills. I'm not doing that, but you get it. Let me get off my poor little high horse.
One of my favorite things, again, you've said this a couple times, is like we are in a time in the world where people like to divorce themselves from their critical thinking skills. We're not teaching people how to think critically, and I think we often AI is used oftentimes like as, oh, I don't have to think about that because the algorithm already thought about it or AI already thought about it. Like there was one last week I made a post that was what's hot and what's not in 2025 in the yoga space, right? And I put in and I asked people and then clearly waited about a time and then I said, well, this is what ChatGPT said about what's hot and what's not. And what's funny is that people were like, oh yeah, that's really good. And then I was like, but are you reading it? Because I think some of it is like Chat GPT generated. Like Chat GPT will always tell you what's hot is AI. Shocker. Like, or like things like it said like what's hot is somatics. And I was like, oh yeah, because you're seeing that trending on social media. But is that hot? Is that really what we're doing? Like, I don't know that that's true. It's like if you're not using it as another way to think, what's the point? Like it shouldn't be thinking for you.
Well, also just that, for example, because again, I always see your posts on the that Facebook group. What we also lose in text is the nuance of inflection, our voices, our gestures, our mannerisms, um, the placements of words within our breath cycle can say a lot about the intention. And so a lot of people don't realize that you are poking a little fun at that because it doesn't translate if they're not familiar with you. If it's somebody brand new who hopped into that,
Yeah.
they don't know your awesome, sense of humor. They also don't know. So if that's their first introduction to you, they're like, oh, wow, she's the expert. She's an administrator of this thing. Wow, this must be really good. She's an advocate for this. So we have to be cognizant of, again, who is in the audience. And that goes back to using Chat GPT to generate things. Our brains atrophy. They talk about, staying cognitively, vital. Well, how do you do that if you're not using your brain? And that's the thing, is that you have people who are like, I'm just a teacher, I'm just an educator. How often are they truly going to class? How often have they tried a class sight unseen, which is hard for a lot of us to go find a class in a community where people don't expect something from you or want to talk to you before and after because they know who you are. You can only take class if you're on vacation because no one knows you. Um, and it's hard, but it's really liberating because we get to learn again what it feels like to be in an uncomfortable situation or a new experience. And I am never going to be arrogant enough to think I know how to do everything. I mean, I thought I knew what I was doing when I was 26. It looks different at 30, look different at 40. I'm in my 50s and I'm like, whew, I just took 4 hours worth of dance classes with Debbie Allen and a bunch of like kids in toddler pants to 80-year-old people. And I watched the most amazing educators teach to a group so diverse in age and ability. And it made me so happy because I'm like, yeah, this is the world I came from. I came from the dance world where we truly know how to teach to multi-level and multi-interest and multi-ability people and make everybody feel welcome, challenged, but not defeated. And I don't see that in the yoga world so much anymore. People are striving, 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 which to me is the antithesis of yoga. AI to me is a symptom of people who are not working their work. They're not living their practice. I mean, I'm guilty of it every so often, but I get up and I do my pliés every day if I can. Which is, your tandus, like I'll hit my little bell before I come into a meeting. I have to ground myself or else what am I doing? So yeah, how we run our business is often indicative of how we do our practice.
So good. Melissa, if somebody wanted to come fangirl about you, where could they find you?
Well, if they're looking to fangirl about my yoga stuff, they're not going to find it because it's all hidden. But I am on Instagram because, again, personal and professional boundaries. I actually closed off all my accounts during the pandemic because I needed boundaries. I love my clients, but you can find me, anyone can find me on Instagram at Melissa Adylia, pause, breathe, smile. So it's just, you put in Melissa pause, Pase. Oh, wait, see, I can't spell. Pausebreathe, smile, Smile. See, golly. So Melissa Adylia Posbury Smile. I'm also on Substack. You could find my links in my Instagram links, so you'll see things there. I'll go ahead and make my yoga public facing, my yoga articles public facing. I have the one about I resurrected the one about hands-on adjustments, and I did another thing about that. And I'm going to probably write some more about yoga. Um, Ask me questions, challenge me, critique me, help me learn too. Please send a message. So you can find me there. IMDb, but that's a whole different podcast. I have another podcast, but yeah, just find me on Instagram. That's the best way to find me, or you'll see me poking around on the Future of Yoga Therapy Facebook page. And Rebecca, I adore you. everybody you've had,
you.
everyone you've had on the podcast. And this is the other thing too. I listen to your podcast, and that's what's really fun. And I
Thank you.
back channel, whatever. I'm not very social.
Yeah.
I encourage everybody, if you want to be a podcast guest, get to know your podcast host first. Be considerate, be kind. There's a lot of people who they want to be a guest on something, but do you really have any interest in that poor person who's putting in all that work? You might learn something. So support Ms. Rebecca Sebastian, the people that are on. If you haven't looked into, Jivana Hyman and accessible yoga, what that man has done, I have sent some of my clients to take his training and they loved it. And they're like, well, I want to be a yoga teacher someday. And I'm like, you know what? Go take the accessible yoga training. Go, first of all, because you're going to empower yourself to feel comfortable to go take class anywhere. And you can go take class anywhere, and you're going to be an example right there. You're going to be a teacher by showing up and being you and doing you. And then when you go take a teacher training, you'll be able to advocate for yourself and teach everybody there too. And that's what they've done. Somebody went to Jivana's thing first, and then they went on to their 200 hour. And then they called me a lot and said, what the hell are they doing? But they're now out there doing some great work. So check out the people on the yoga therapy, on God, I can't even talk right now. The whole podcast. I'm starving. My stomach's growling. I love you. I fangirl over you big time. I'm a big old nerd. I tell people to listen to your doggone podcast. Like, oh, here we go again. Wasn't I just talking about this?
So much. You were the best. Oh, I just love this. Thank you.
I adore you. Thank you. Have a beautiful rest of your day.
Thank you so much for this, Melissa. Here are our key takeaways. First, labor unions are a particular love of mine. I have a deep desire to see us collectively organize in wellness within North America so that we can be better informed and advocate for ourselves in the world and also have health care. I think this is especially important for us in the yoga therapy space as we slide into so many different and diverse places that seek to use our tools like meditation, breathwork, lifestyle, and philosophy principles to improve the lives of the humans that they see and interact with. Next, why would you work so hard to be part of a system that isn't working? Yes, this can be true for healthcare, toxic yoga studio spaces, training programs that aren't run ethically, and more. And don't get me wrong, I'm not above this. I totally have been part of a toxic yoga space, but the desire that yoga and yoga therapy has as an industry to integrate into a system that isn't looking to be the best for the people who use it, well, that's just not us. Some might call it gross or appropriative even. Next, let's talk about this idea of AI not being able to generate a personalized program for people. I think that it won't be too long before I absolutely can do that. Actually, I think it already can. I'm going to be honest with you. But I truly mean like next Tuesday. So we need to stop saying that the thing that differentiates us from AI is the ability to personalize. What else are we offering besides the ability to personalize a program for somebody? Maybe it's less about the personalization of the yoga program and more about being seen as a whole person by another human being who is right in front of you. Next, the joy of the struggle is something that has come up several times on this series and was first mentioned in an episode by Jay Brown. There is something to us struggling through finding ideas and learning to be a better yoga professional. I can now say with confidence that I have done pretty much everything that there is to do in the yoga space. Yoga teacher, yoga therapist, yoga studio owner, former nonprofit founder, trainer, writer, speaker. Do we have an EGOT? Can I be qualified for that? Because I think I have it. And no matter the amount of times you've asked me, how did you do all that, Rebecca? My answer is always going to be, you have to get so good that your work is undeniable and people want to work with you. And my friend, you don't get good if you don't struggle. Next, the perspective that Melissa brings about yoga therapy hours and how many hours we can work a week is really important because she's right. Most yoga therapists are working a max of 15 hours a week. And that's sometimes because the work is incredibly difficult, especially if we strive to be present with our clients. So maybe we need to be discussing not just the fact that there's not enough work for us, but how we can support the professionals doing work because it's very difficult to see yoga therapy clients so often. Next, yoga has a poverty problem. This is just going to be a key takeaway every time I say it on the podcast, because we don't have a scarcity problem. We don't have a mindset problem. We don't have an abundance problem. It's a poverty problem, and we need to address it at a poverty level. Next, using AI to create yoga teacher trainings. I'm so glad Melissa brought this up. How are the organizations that certify our trainings making sure that there are actual humans writing the manuals and the people who are facilitating the programs have embodied yoga experience? As Melissa said, doing the work is part of your profession as an ethical human being. So yeah, that times 200,000. Next, protecting our intellectual property is something that we should be talking about and training our students about. Maybe I should find someone to consult and make a best practices for intellectual property management for the yoga community, because that feels like something we desperately need. And finally, our humanity and connection with each other will be something that is not replicable by tech or AI. If you have ever interacted with an LLM, that's a large language model AI like ChatGPT, you will notice that they're programmed for likability. I know I have thought, when I've used ChatGPT specifically, that this is the most girly pop AI ever. But true likability and connection doesn't feel false. True trust involves questioning people's thought processes if they need it. And being truly seen and known as a human is something that is a core need of all people. So thank you so much for this conversation, Melissa. The next episode is our final episode of interviews in the series, and that is with Ram Bakht. Ram has been building in tech and also operating in the yoga space for a long time, and he comes to us with some amazing ideas, like seriously, I freaked out, you guys are going to love it, on how we can incorporate tech into our working world. Until then, I am forever grateful for you all listening to this podcast and sharing some of your time and attention with me. Let's go get to work, my friends, and I will catch you around the water cooler next time.